So today, it's a bit different. We're not going to talk about a particular competency. We wanted to talk more about sort of kind of the maturity model as we've been now doing this for, I think it's now it's over 2 years now. So yeah, it's 2 years and a couple of months now. So we wanted to talk about kind of some of our findings. I was hoping that there would be some others on to talk about their findings as well, so you might have to listen to mine. But also, I wanted to ask you about your findings as well. So we'll come to those questions. Hi there, Marc. So the guest stars is all of us today. So we'd love you to get involved. That would be brilliant to hear your stories, but we'll come to that later on. So if you haven't been joined us before for the practitioners maturity model practitioners session, then welcome. And our agenda today is that we sort of explain a bit about the maturity model and talk about its purpose and what's changed since we last met. And then we talk about how we'd like you to get involved and how you can get involved. We'll then do a shout out in together mode, and then we'll go into our main topic, which is the maturity model and kind of our findings. So maturity model in an ever-changing world. The fact that you are all here, I think, means you probably followed these instructions, but we're now changed the way that we do our meeting registrations. And you can download a calendar invite, which will set up a series of appointments in your Outlook calendar using this link here. Okay, so what is the purpose of the maturity model? Well, it aims to help organizations improve the way that they use technology, and particularly how they can use the Microsoft 365 platform to leverage benefits to the business. And the way that we do that is we have a set of competencies, and they're around common areas that businesses need to be able to, function. So it might be around how we collaborate, how we communicate, how we manage our content. Now recently we've got our new governance, risk and compliance competency. So how we could manage and govern our Microsoft 365 and the information in there. Also, we talk about how to improve staff retention and how to develop your maturity around training through organization. The idea of it is to have something which is technology agnostic, really. I mean, you could apply this maturity model using other tooling, but the idea is it's to allow you to have those, I keep using the word grown-up conversations with senior management teams, where you can help them understand the benefits that they could leverage using the 365 platform and increasing maturity. It also allows us a way of socializing those activities, those behaviors, to boost the outcomes within an organization. We have a set of artifacts. We've got a set of competencies and tools which we use and to allow you to show you how to run a 365 workshop. And we also have some supporting articles, so we've got the principles of search, the principles of communication, to help you understand kind of where we're coming from when we talk about the competency, the communication competency. But also, the maturity model, those articles are quite sort of, they're quite a bit abstract. So we have the how to elevate, which kind of says, if you are looking at your organization and you're a level 100, how could you move up the levels to increase your maturity? And we've got articles around collaboration, communication, people and communities, as you can see there. Okay. The other thing is that we love people. This is a community effort. We're just a group of people who get together and like talking about this stuff and writing a few words. But we'd love people to get involved. It's part of the Sharing is Caring initiative. And again, the idea of this practitioners session is to have a safe place, a safe space for people to discuss their ideas and test their thoughts, and also promote how you're using the maturity model. So, if you've ever got an idea for a case study, something that you've done at your organization, then it'd be fantastic to have a conversation about that. We've got some links there to the previous recordings of the practitioner sessions, and then also there's a link to how to run a maturity model for Microsoft 365 workshop. And everything is run through GitHub. So if you go to our GitHub repository, you're able to start discussions with the team there as well. So yeah, we'd love your involvement there. Marc, are you on? I see. There's Marc on. So the maturity model provides benchmarks to measure your organization. So the maturity model is set out at 5 levels. Level 100 is that initial maturity level. It's the kind of the default state when you start in the competency. It's the keywords which describe it are sort of ad hoc, chaotic. But then the idea, as you move away from that level 100, you move up to a level 200, and you're moving to a managed state. So now you've got some processes, but they're not sort of standardized or across the entire organization, but you're starting to make some headway. You're starting to implement some processes which you can start with, and start adding some consistency. When we move to level 300, then we are a defined level. The idea is that we've got a process which is our competency, which is rolled out through the entire organization, and it is a consistent sort of behavior across that organization. So we've got the way that we work is documented, it's planned, it's controlled, it's stable. We move from level 300 to level 400, which is predictable. This is where we're starting to now look at how we measure the benefit, the outcomes to those competencies. So we're starting to put metrics in place. Maybe if we had Viva goals in place, we might start having some objective and some key results around how a competency is driving value to the business. And then from level 400, we've got level 500, this kind of nirvana state where everything is optimal. It's being continually improved, using those metrics to build a better competency and better outcomes for that organization. Hi guys. So let me move to the next one. We've got another slight different view of the levels. I won't go through them all again, but just pick out the intent. So level 100, everything's everything's about just keeping the lights on, putting the fires out. We're reacting to things as they happen. Level 200, we know what we think we should be doing, but we haven't got everybody working that way. Level 300, we've defined our policies and our processes, and everyone's doing things in the right way. And then level 400, where we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's really embedded in the organization. The culture of the organization is helping drive. We're measuring these. We're putting metrics around our competencies to level 500. We are always doing the best. We're always the most effective. If things like a pandemic happen, we're able to cope with that, and we're resilient. Okay. We've got another view of how we see where these levels fit. So, level 100, we're sort of applying to, startups or new departments or new teams which are being created within an organization. Level 200, where the organization or the department or the team is maturing, it's starting to find its feet, and then 300, where we're well established, we've got our ways of working written down, and we're sort of we're solid. With level 400, we're really pushing, starting to push the envelope. We're starting to look at how we can go from that level 300 to moving things forward up to level 500, when we are at the top of our game, and you've got that bell curve behind, showing us kind of where we think organizations generally would sit. So in terms of topics, today we're talking about maturity in an ever-changing world. Next session, which I believe will be November the 15th, we will be talking about our new modern infrastructure competency. And then, if there's, what we would always love to hear from you, if there's other competencies which you'd like to hear more about, then, we can always, these things aren't set in stone. We can always change these things around. So thank you to the May attendees. So yeah, I think this one we haven't updated from September, but yeah, thank you to all those who joined us in September. We've there's always ways of learning how you can contribute. There's a set of sessions which are run by the PMP community. Great sessions teaching you all things you need to know when you're contributing to the PMP world. How you can write for the web. I mean, one of the things that I learned from all of this was the acronym TLDR. I had no idea what that meant until I started working on the maturity model. Our next session is on November the 15th, and that should be on modern infrastructure, and there's a link there to the invite. But thanks for those who came last month. So we're going to turn, we would love you to turn your videos on. David, do you mind if I hand over to you to be able to do the together mode stuff? Would that be okay?
Absolutely, no problemo. So I'm going to share my screen. If everybody wants to turn on their camera, we'll get this. There we go. Open back up. And still got some seats left in the classroom. I don't know what I'm doing at the front. Oh boy. I got that nice big head in the back for the spitballs, right?
Are you our teacher today?
No, I guess I'm teacher's. I'm trying to suck up to the teacher, I guess. So, okay, let me start the recording. All right, let's give some hand waves. Woo! Great to see everyone. Excellent. All right, you look wonderful. Okay, we'll hand it back over to Simon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so right, so this is kind of where we kind of talk about our topic for today. So I've put together some findings, but I would love the rest of the team to jump in as we talk about these, and then add any of their own as well. But it's something which we talked about a lot, particularly in the initial sessions, where as competency maturity increases, the organizations actually start embedding that competency into their culture. So there's that sort of move from being kind of process to then people. Once you get to kind of that level 300, to be able to really start shifting to level 400 and 500, it's embedding that competency into the culture so that people kind of instinctively, they know, kind of how to collaborate, how to communicate, that they know where, sort of the values which are coming from those competencies. So it turns more into a cultural a culture thing within an organization and embedding the values with an organization. Has anybody, Simon or Sharon, have you got any thoughts on this? I remember us having a few conversations around this area.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as we kind of reflect which one does, in a good maturity model, I think, if you're at a good level, you're actually going back and being like, what did we learn from all of this? And I think one of the things that has come up consistently in every conversation is as we talk about the different maturity models and we work on these different areas, every time we realized how much the cultural fabric plays in the maturity model overall. And as you go up, the culture becomes embedded in the maturity model, and the culture reflects the not just the need to change, but the willingness to support change and the willingness to encourage change and the willingness to really think about that.
Yeah,
I'd be curious. I'd be curious if anyone who's on the call has any observations about their organization and what changes they've seen in their culture as they try to roll out some of these maturity concepts, regardless of which competency you're talking about. Have you seen differences in the way people think about their work because of that? Or you come off mute and say something.
Feel free to pop your hand up, come on camera, come off mute.
All right, this is Kathy. With the new company I'm in now, they're slowly, they accept certain things that I'm trying to implement. However, there's still some restraint in changing their mind concept or their culture.
So what you can do is first create a site collection with this connection name. And
okay, I've muted him. Carry on, Kathy.
But anyway, but it's hard because right now everything is a mess right now. Nothing, even with migration and there's no procedures. There's nothing. And a lot of their documentation, there's no ISO, there's no governance of any sort of documentation. So I'm starting from scratch with what they have. And so it's taken me away from my playtime. But
You could view that as a set of opportunities, I suppose.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to automate some of the stuff like from Erica and with Joanne. So I'm trying to get those in. And then what Emily's put in, that alone has been helping me. And of course, our database here for the maturity model. But I'm like I said, I'm real below the 100. I'm not even there yet. It's like 10.
Do you feel like the relative competency level is the same across all of the competencies in this organization, or does it vary based on which competency you're thinking of?
Yeah, so far it does depend. For example, finance labs, accounts, payables, and engineering, and especially ops. But of course, IT is fantastic. So, but yeah, I mean, they're willing. And again, I think it's because they've gone through several SharePoint or whatever. My new title is Digital Workplace Specialist, but they've gone through several last 3-4 years where they had this person and they didn't do anything. Nothing was documented. There's no like inventory. There's nothing. And I think that's what's also hindering them on accepting these things. They were all talk and no action. They didn't do any follow through. And slowly they're seeing me organize their processes / document those, and especially trying to do the knowledge bases and policies and procedures. Yeah, but they're slowly getting there. And it's only been 2 months. 2 months
Well,
since I joined.
Given the importance of culture, I mean, our thesis here is that the culture is a really important aspect of, reaching any sort of higher level maturity model. You might want to think about what steps you could take to sort of bring people along culturally, as opposed to focusing just on a specific process. For example, have some brown bag lunches where you all discuss, the physical office. I'm always thinking physical offices, but get people together to talk about their challenges, get people to try to educate them on which competencies you think you want to move people forward on initially, so that they start to get the mindset. And I think that's sort of the premise of this particular bullet, is you need to get people thinking a different way as opposed to just doing things a different way. So, I mean, clearly you've got some thoughts about where to go, and I'm sure that you'll have success. But it does take sort of a holistic view.
Yeah, I know I've got it. I have to learn to bring them in sooner than when I normally do. Because it looks like when I show them something that's already it. It's written in stone. And I try to explain to them, no, this is just like a proof of concept, a draft, whatever you want to call it. And it's hard for them to think that this is the way we're going to do it. And that's not the case. But thank you, Mark.
Well, thanks for sharing. That's great.
Yeah, Carol says we've been trying to get people to think about problems they need to solve. I like the idea of having them discuss together to look at potential solutions. And I think that's, we're talking about this idea of really getting people to focus on, change together as an organization. And I think that is one big key driver. We talk a lot about, I think all of us have some level of interaction with different companies of, helping them kind of go up that ladder in different areas. And I do think one of the big things that I find is very successful is when you work with a group of people in the organization and they're all working together to solve the same problem. I think that really makes a huge difference in the potential success. I see a hand up, Mike.
I think for me, the maturity model when working with clients, the thing that's most interesting about it is that it helps us help them focus on where not to invest and what not to do, right? So not everybody needs to be a 500 level at everything, and they can really think about alignment and business value of the things they choose to do out of the pile that's always going to be bigger than the resources they have. This is a useful lens and model for that, in my experience.
So true.
In case you're
wondering.
In fact,
I think Mark says that pretty constantly every time we meet.
In case you're wondering why Simon is switching back and forth, my internet has been totally ridiculous, and I had slides already for some of this.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Yes. So something which I took for our organisation, and we use for a lot with other organisations as well, is when we did the management of content, we talked about this idea that you have a department area where it's very public, it's public facing, or it's public within the rest of the organisation, but then you use Microsoft Teams for your internal team collaboration, and that's something which has worked really well in our organisation. And I know that we talk a lot about not sharing documents via email and sharing links, but something I have noticed more in our organisation is that because I'm doing it, more other people are doing the same thing, and so we will create a project team, and we will share the documents there, and we'll share the links, and we'll invite the customers in or the suppliers in, so that they're seeing that central truth, and yeah, that's interesting to see that change in behaviour, sort of since starting on this journey. Right. Okay. So we've got a load of questions on the next slide, which I think I'm going to flip through to those. Let's just see if they come up. So the question is, have you been able to shift thinking in your organization to focus more on outcomes instead of process? Anybody got any thoughts on that? This all comes down the session with Susan Hanley, where she was really talking about outcomes.
I think what ends up happening sometimes is that people get so sort of myopic almost. We need a workflow and we need it to work exactly like this, and it's all about that process, and the outcome often goes by the wayside. And one of the outcomes that you generally want in the course of a process is a good user experience or customer experience, depending on what kind of process it is. So oftentimes we have, and Kathy, I think you were alluding to some of this, you have processes that people don't understand, don't enjoy following, don't necessarily lead to the outcomes that you want. By flipping things around, and this is very much something I agree with Sue on, by flipping things around to talk about, well, what are the outcomes you want to reach? Now let's think about how we engineer the process in order to reach those outcomes. And we often do that with user stories and things like that. We design a better process. And I think, when you look at the business process competency, as you move up the different levels, you see that the process thinking should change. Has anyone seen a difference in the way you're approaching process with the maturity model as a toolkit?
I mean, from our perspective, we're always looking at what is the challenge. We will tackle the things where we've got a challenge. So, for example, when we start a new project, there's so many things which we have to do when we start a new project. So looking, that becomes quite time consuming. So if we take the business process competency, it's like, right, well, what do we need to do? So we need to add a customer into Zero for our accounting. We have to add something into manage metadata. We have to create a Teams area. So we'll come up with document that process first, and a lot of that is being led by some of the sessions which we had on the business process, which Sharon took us through. But yeah, documenting that process first, but tackling those things which are causing us pain, or we're not working in a consistent way. So the maturity models helped in that way.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is very healthy is to question those processes every period of time, whatever it is. I mean, we certainly work with a lot of clients who say, well, this was started back 10 years ago and this is just the way we do it. And it's like, well, yeah, but what are you trying to accomplish? And people may not have sort of turned around and said, oh, well, wait a minute, this isn't actually the way we do things anymore. And they're sort of ramming things through a process instead of thinking about where they want to end up. And that's I think something that, in a sense, has been a shift over the last, 10 or 20 years of people, focusing on the process itself versus focusing on what.
Well, and I think we've had so much change in general. Technology has changed, the world has changed. And so I think, a lot of people were dependent on things staying the same for a long time. And with change comes the need to reevaluate. I think somebody popped their hand up. Carol?
Yeah, that was me. You had asked, what we have done as far as shifting, and we're still very much at the beginning of that process. But we did have Sue Hanley working with us for a while, and that was very helpful. She talked to a bunch of user groups, and she very much came in with that approach of what are you trying to solve rather than how can we make this process digital? What are you trying to do? And so I wouldn't say that we have people totally on board with that yet, but they're getting used to me asking that question when they come to me with something. I want to do this. Well, what are you trying to do? Where do you want to get? So that is, I think we're starting to see that shift. But there's still, change is hard, which is a surprise to no one. So yeah, like I said, at the beginning, but starting to see it.
I think one of the things that this whole COVID experience is that this pandemic was not something anyone predicted, obviously. And most organizations have had to change the way they think about their processes on a regular basis. Sort of dwelling on step 17 of the process without thinking about, yeah, but how have our goals changed because the world is different, leads to, engineering processes that are sort of wrong by the time you implement them. But I think that sort of an ongoing questioning, given the context of where things are in this changing world, how is hybrid work working in our organization? How do we think about people getting together physically versus not? All of that continues to evolve, and if you're not focusing on the outcomes, you can make some interesting, useful decisions.
Yeah, if you're not focusing on outcomes, a lot of times you're just focusing on change for the sake of change, or you're focusing on, you don't even know what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's right. And when you do that, then people just kind of don't have a sense of purpose, do they? So there's no reason to do it, and it's difficult to get people behind what it is you're trying to do then. So yeah. If we move on to the next question, which we've already talked about, so I think we'll just flip on to the next one. So yeah, be interested to hear what competencies have people found the most useful. Which ones sort of have driven the most value for you?
Feel free to drop those in chat if you don't. I mean, if you can come off mute, or you can come on camera, or just maybe pop them in chat. Which competencies? And what we're talking about is the different areas that we've covered, the different topics, the different things over the last year or so during these sessions that have really maybe helped you think about things or solve problems, or understand things better.
Or what's missing.
Or what's missing. Yeah.
People love
absolutely.
Yeah, this is Marc Williams here. I'm excited for the infrastructure competency to kind of come back up above radar. I noticed that it was kind of slated to be next early in the year, and then it just kind of went away. So I've been eagerly looking for that. I have a customer that's been looking at a different maturity model, but the Microsoft one seemed to align to their needs. And we were kind of waiting for the infrastructure competency to help them address some areas of concern.
That's really helpful for me, actually. So Simon Hudson and I have been working on that. We've had a meeting every couple of weeks for the last couple of months to work on that. And the infrastructure topic, as you can imagine, has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. And so we originally, it took us quite a bit to get to that because there have been so many changes, and we're rethinking how that applies. So that's really very helpful for me, because I think that will come back around pretty quickly.
Maybe you should share your draft with Marc.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that if that's something you could do. I actually contribute to the cloud maturity model that's developed by the Open Alliance for cloud adoption, so I do have some experience.
That's great.
Cool, amazing. Great to get involved.
Not to steal any of your practitioners.
It's all out in the open, isn't it? It's
it
all
sure
about
is.
sharing. Yeah.
I mean, I think all of these things are tools in the toolkit, right? And we pick and choose what works for us to solve particular problems and get to certain outcomes. Sometimes it's a mix of things, sometimes it's this or that, and that's all.
Anybody else? Specific competencies that you've really enjoyed or been helpful? Definitely heard talk of Sue several times.
See us, maybe that's it. About
Mark, you're really quiet.
Should we move on to the next one then? That's two. So, what have you learned from or been inspired by related to the maturity model? I've given away some of mine already.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've even chatted about this, and if anybody else has any comments, please feel free to pop your hand up, go into chat, come off of mute. But I know, and we did talk about this at the very beginning. I think the biggest thing for me is over the course of all of these conversations, every time we prep for this discussion, and every time we work on the Microsoft maturity model, it just becomes clearer and clearer and clearer how much behavioral culture really comes into play as you progress through the maturity levels. And to Mark's point, I know he mentioned before, is that idea of, really getting people to kind of take that next step and move a little bit, and maybe even feel a little uncomfortable because you're doing something that you've never done before, and helping the people around you be like, we want to accomplish this. How can we do something different to shake it up and get there?
Yeah, definitely. The other thing which, and this was Agnes when she did a session on search, she had this great comment about, businesses and people really care about their sort of external SEO, and people, and driving their customers onto the website, but actually never think about the internal intranet and doing SEO on that to make sure that people can find the tools, the information which they need. And they probably, people will spend a huge amount of time and effort if they can't find that content, and they go off and create a document again which has already been created. And I thought that was a really good point when we had Agnes on.
And I think another thing is that, it doesn't matter how big or how small of a group you're working with. And I don't care if you're talking about a department or a company or a committee or anything. Like, I think everybody still goes through these different levels. And it's really funny how much this has really become, fundamental. I've always been a big believer in maturity models, like at the idea of really just knowing where you're at. And it's always funny to me how I get into conversations and we'll be talking about something and I'll be like, oh, that's because you're at this point on the maturity model. And here's the things, I know where you're at. I know what you're struggling with. I know what the next steps are, because it's so clear, how to kind of call that out. And so I think that's been super helpful to be able to have something to baseline against, to be able to see it clearly so that we know where are we and what do we need to do next. Not like you said, everybody doesn't have to shoot for 500. What we do have to do is understand where are we and what's that next bite we can take. Whether, like I said, whether it's a couple of people, whether it's a department, whether it's a whole company, it at least helps us know where we're at and where we're going.
Can you hear me okay? I know
Yes.
I'm sort of in la la land today. I think that raises an interesting point. I think sometimes when people think about a maturity model like this, or some tool that's going to change the way people work, it's incredibly intimidating. But I always think of the phrase, think globally, act locally. Even if you can improve the way your small team works, or some things that your department is doing, or a process that that a lot of people in the organization use, but only occasionally. If you can make a difference on on a small level, that's what starts to push the needle on that cultural change. So it doesn't have to be this massive effort that crosses an entire organization. It needs to be the size and shape of what's your sphere of influence, and how can you make a difference. So don't expect that you have to have some project management office to do this. You just need people who are willing to listen to some different ways of thinking about things and act on them.
I love that comment so much. I feel like people often think that it has to be the CEO or the CIO and a team of highly paid consultants to make change, and I 100% agree. It really is just a matter of people, tackling it where they're at and dealing with their own specific area to really begin. I think it takes both, honestly. I think it's really helpful when leadership is supportive of that change. But yeah, the boots on the ground, right? The day-to-day people can inspire just as much change.
No, absolutely. In a perfect world, you have air cover, you've got senior leadership buy-in, you've got senior leadership leading, in a sense, leading the charge. And that is certainly a recipe for success. But if you're a team of 3 people and you just say, we're going to do things better, let's start working on that right now, you can actually make a huge difference in some outcomes, right? The way people work with you improve the user experience or the customer experience that you have. And so I don't think people should feel disheartened if they can't sort of start a huge effort inside their organization. Sometimes the smaller efforts are what that senior management attention requires. Oh, hey, this team's doing really well. There have been some great case studies around people who decide to all wear black T-shirts and call themselves the ninjas and stuff, and they become the super agents in the company. And they make a huge difference, and then everything starts to be modeled on them. That's where a lot of these quality and sort of black belt kind of efforts actually originally came from. Small efforts that turn big.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's it, isn't it? It's starting on the journey. I mean, like, take this group. That's kind of what we're trying to do, isn't it? To improve, how people make use of the Microsoft 365 platform. And we're a very small part of the Microsoft 365 world. So yeah, absolutely right. Should we move on to the next question then? Have your processes changed significantly due to your maturity efforts? Any thoughts on that? So from my perspective, I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, the way that we manage projects and we run projects has changed a lot. Predominantly from the management of content competency. That's really been and yeah, that's really helped us. And it's quite, when customers are using it as well, they're like, oh, this is really nice. They start to get to see how people use Teams and how they can leverage Teams as well. And and then that's all part of the learning, isn't it? People, sort of showing people how they can do something, they take that away and they adopt those approaches in their organizations. So yeah, so our processes have changed in that way.
We've seen a lot of the same kind of things at Sympraxis. We're a small company. We're only 6 full-time employees, and too much process is actually too much process, right? I mean, it just gets in our way. But we actually just had a company meeting, and we're thinking about, well, how do we improve things each time we get together, and we decide which levers to pull based on what needs them, where will we benefit the most, and what will drive success as opposed to just be process. And so I think that focus, and we talk about the maturity model constantly internally. where we're not so mature on that. We're doing better on that. Sometimes people will ask us, well, how do you do this thing that you're telling us to do? And it's like, but we're 6 people, or 5,000. So the answer has to be different. So I think that sort of right sizing the maturity of your organization to the size and shape of your organization, which I know are sort of obscure words, but it's not every organization being the same. It's about being mindful of what your processes, where are you going to get benefit from having more effective processes versus more sort of freewheeling ability, individual contributor kind of stuff.
It's funny, Mark, because I very much agree, and I come from a background of a very high level of process, very mature models in large corporations, and I think one of the things I've learned is exactly the same thing is what are you trying to accomplish and what do you need to do to make sure that you're doing that consistently and dependably and reliably is more important than having all the extra weighted, documentation and extra process steps just for the sake of having them. Is, can I get here in a faster way, in a better way, in a more efficient way, but still be reliable and still be sustainable? And so I've learned a lot, as I've matured and as my company has matured and as I've worked with this, and we use the maturity model quite a bit too. We always talk about where we're at and what we're trying to accomplish and where are we. And you can always tell when you're like kind of hitting your head on something and you're ready to go to that next level and you're like, how can we make this better? How can we accomplish the same task but make it better and do it in a way that's just that much more efficient and that much more easy? And so I think sometimes the maturity in and of itself is getting rid of some of the excess waste of process that you don't necessarily need to be successful.
Yeah, that's a good point. Does anybody have any thoughts? Please add them to the chat or raise your hand and
chat, questions, funny memes, whatevs. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah, I'll add just something I've observed. This is a long time ago, but with one of the cloud maturity models, I had a customer take the model, appreciated its structure, but they wanted to make it basically tailored to their particular business. So like they took several parts of what we call domains in the OACA CMM, and they made basically their own company version of it to make it personal and relatable to their constituents and their peer organizations. And I think that's just another example of how the concepts of these models can be applied in different ways, but you can garner more interest and adoption of it by taking some of these unique and extra steps like that.
That's one of the things we're always interested in hearing about is how have people taken this maturity and sort of morphed it into something that works well for them, because there isn't a single answer, and that makes a lot of people sort of uncomfortable. It's like, wait a minute, I have to sort of take this and interpret it for myself. But I think you're right. Those are often the best implementations are the ones where this is true of any business model. Any book you can read that gives you some sort of here's the secret to success. You need to take those concepts, internalize them, and turn them into something that is going to be valuable for and match your organization's culture and goals.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll go on to the next question, which is how have your maturity goals changed since COVID?
This is the whole COVID, and I mentioned this earlier. I'll just reiterate because I like to do that. The fact that this pandemic sort of descended on us out of the blue, and we all had to change the way we were doing our work. And that's true even of a company like ours, where all 6 of us were working from home anyway. The way we found our clients wanting to interact, the way they, the things that they were concerned with were different, the kinds of projects we got were different. So we've had to think about how we do our work in a way that is different because of the schism that the pandemic caused. And what works well and what doesn't did change. I mean, we started to think about different things because of the pandemic. How businesses function has changed. How people do their work has changed. The technology has changed because of that. I mean, Microsoft has made efforts to address some of these needs by rolling out different aspects of. There's some things in Teams that probably would never see the light of day if they're having a pandemic. So we're curious about what impact you think the pandemic has had on the way your organization thinks about maturity and success and those positive outcomes.
It's interesting to me how many groups I've seen have really kind of gone back to basics. So it's that idea of, we had all kind of these crazy process, all these, complicated, complex processes going on. And I've had a lot of clients that really, as a result of the pandemic afterwards, during and afterwards, really kind of simplified down to the nuts and bolts of just getting things done in whatever way possible. And it's like, how fast can we get this, and this? That's all we care about. And so how quickly can we like really get focused and decide these are the things that are important to us. These are the things that need to be accomplished. And all this other stuff doesn't even really matter, which I think was fantastic because it forced people to look at that. I see a comment in here from Elias. The COVID forced and accelerated the entire infrastructure maturity of companies with remote work, cybersecurity, and the use of Microsoft unified platforms. 100%. Yeah, remote work became very important very quickly. And those who had already set it up, were very successful with that. And I think, it's really funny because I had one client who we had already kind of transitioned over to M365 and they were starting to work, have some virtual elements. And I mean, they literally just picked up their laptops and walked out the door and were great. And then I had other clients who had not gotten there and had really kind of been pushing back on that change. And when COVID hit, they were like, oh, well, we now need you to do this today. Like, we need to get this figured out. And all of a sudden, you're absolutely right. The infrastructure maturity around remote work became very, very important to them. So it's interesting how things like that can really make you focus on what's important.
Yeah, that's fact. We saw that a lot with people working remotely but staying on VPNs, and then the VPNs didn't have the capacity to manage all those connections, and then and so people were switching then to more of an open model with Microsoft 365 and the security around that. And then the other bit around maturity and around sort of the security aspect of it is just a lot more hackers looking to take advantage of people working remotely, and that's proliferated, isn't it? So we've seen chatted about with customers about how they've looked to mature the education of their users about phishing attacks and those attack vectors on the business as well. So that's something which we could probably update in our competencies too. Yeah, completely changed.
It's a different world, but the same.
It really is. Yes, almost. Right, I think that was the last question.
Does anybody on the call have any other questions or comments? Anything you'd like to bring up?
This excuse me, this session was obviously a little bit different than what we've done previously. For those of you who are online, how do you feel about this one? Was it helpful? We've usually focused on a particular competency and drilled into it. This was more of a discussion. Which do you not prefer, but do you think we should do more sessions like this, or should we focus more on specific competencies?
I'll chime in again. I like the deeper dives into the competencies, and I'm curious for the November session, is that where the infrastructure domain will be, or competency, I should say, will that be kind of public at that time, or preview?
Sharon, what do you think?
I'm going to make no promises, but I do have a call with Simon Hudson this week, and we've made pretty significant progress on that particular competency. So I will definitely let him know that we have somebody eagerly awaiting it and see if we can't get it wrapped up.
Yeah, and I pinged you on Twitter to see if you can share it, and if I have some cycles, I can try to help too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that session could be just kind of, this is some of the things we're thinking about, you know, and
That's
it's
not
sort
a
of
bad
a
idea.
preview. Yeah, you know, and then, yeah, it'd be great to hear Mark's thoughts, Marc with the K's thoughts, or Marc with the C, of course, who wasn't to hear your thoughts too. But yeah, I think that'd be really, really interesting.
Yeah. What do you guys, I mean, I think that's a great idea, actually. So speaking of changing and doing things differently, you know, a lot of times we work on these competencies and we get industry experts to come in and really give us that feedback. But, you know, it's not a bad idea really to open that up and, you know, have the community weigh in on their thoughts and feelings about, you know, specific competencies, and maybe having a roundtable with this group to say, you know, we're going to bring this to you. We've kind of got some framework put together, but we'd love your input on it, kind of like a preview call. I think that's a great idea.
Well, this is, I mean, just to point out the obvious, I mean, this is very much an open source effort. So, you know, want people to question what we're doing and contribute and suggest changes or improvements. And, you know, to be honest, we don't get a lot of that. I think I saw, I'm on my phone, so it's a little hard for me to tell, but I think somebody said, is there a hub for the maturity model? And there is, you know, it's part of the Microsoft community docs effort. And we have lots of articles and everything available there. So I don't know if somebody could pop that link into the chat. Thanks, Simon.
I'm grabbing it.
Right.
It's done.
But you know, if you're reading something, you know, Marc, it sounds like you've got a lot of experience with at least one other cloud, you know, the cloud maturity model. We would love to get your perspective on what we have so far. You know, what do you think could be better? What do you think could be clearer? And not just you, anybody who's on the call, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. I've already, just in going through your model, there's several things I prefer it over the one I have more experience with. Just, I think the way your documentation is laid out, it's very much more readable than our model. We kind of crammed everything into a single Excel. So I think your Excel calculator is easier to navigate. So, but I will definitely keep other things in mind in terms of, you know, are the particular elements that maybe we've captured in ours that would be represented or missing in yours. You know, I'm happy to take those perspectives and share.
Awesome.
I know we're at the end of our time, but, you know, once again, thank you so much for coming. Simon's got the screen up.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
So you can follow us on Twitter, of course, M365 Maturity. There's the discussion. There's a link there to the discussions on GitHub, and we've got links to to our YouTube channel and the previous slide decks as well. Sharon, go on. I've interrupted you. You what were you going to say? That's it.
No,
so
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Cool. Okay. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on November the 15th, at the same time, same back channel. We'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone.